Welcome back. For today's video, I'm going to be discussing my initial experience with meal prep. So just as a bit of background, I've been doing meal prep now for the past 5, maybe 6 weeks, with the exception of last week as I was on break. But I just wanted to make this video to, one, advocate for it and why I think it would be beneficial, but also two, to give any tips to any of you who may want to start with meal prep. And these are just a few things that I've sort of learned over these first few weeks and a few things that I think would have been helpful to know going into it. And so with that out of the way, without further ado, let's jump right into it. First things first, what is meal prep? And for anyone who's unfamiliar, meal prep is essentially planning out and cooking your meals ahead of time. And for anyone who hasn't meal prepped before, you may be wondering, well, why would I do this ahead of time? Why wouldn't I just cook what I want to eat each day? And there's actually quite a few big benefits to meal prep. The first of these benefits is that meal prep can help actually save a lot of time throughout the week. So for anyone with an extremely busy schedule, this can be very beneficial for you, as instead of maybe having to work an extremely long shift of work and then having to go home and cook for yourself, instead, once you get home, you can just go straight into the fridge and grab the meal that you've already made for yourself. The next benefit of meal prep is that it can actually also save money, as opposed to eating out. And so this benefit likely seems intuitive, as if you're the one who's preparing the meals for yourself, then you only are really needing to pay for the groceries and the different ingredients that go into the meals that you're making, as opposed to eating out, where you're not only paying for the food, but you're also paying for the labor of the chef who's preparing that food. And finally, the third benefit, and the one that I personally would argue is the biggest benefit, is that it can help you to better regulate what you're eating. And I actually mean this in a few different ways. So first, you're better able to control your portion size. So since you're making the food for the week all at once, you then basically can just evenly divide it across your meals, thus ensuring that you're going to have equal portions throughout the week. Unless you're psychotic and decide to eat 1 pound of chicken for lunch one day and then decide to only have 1 bite of chicken the next. But, if that's your thing, go for it by all means. The second way that meal prep helps you to regulate what you eat is through being able to actually control what specific foods you're eating. As, again, you're the one who's putting the recipes together, you're the one who's cooking the foods, unless you know exactly what's being included in the recipes. And there's also a little side benefit to this, which is that it actually helps you to be able to track your nutritional data. So thinking of like your calories that you're consuming, the macros that you're consuming, and other things like that. And the reason for it, again, is because you have those specific measurements and you know specifically what you're putting into your meals. And thus you're going to know basically like the nutritional data of those foods that you're eating. And lastly, it actually makes it less likely for you to eat out, which again sort of just helps you to know what you're eating. And so this may sound a little bit random, but basically just take, for example, someone who has food at home that they can cook and make for a meal. However, maybe they just had an extremely long day at work, and thus they're extremely tired, and they really don't want to cook when they get home. This then makes them more likely to want to stop somewhere and eat out, as opposed to going home and cooking that food, as opposed to someone who had already meal prepped at the start of the week and then can just go home knowing that their food's already made and that they don't have to cook anything, and they also don't have to wash any dishes, with the exception of obviously the plate that they're eating on. And so these are the main benefits that drive people to incorporate meal prep into their weekly routine. Now, I should note that there is the caveat that you have to spend a relatively decent-sized chunk of time preparing all of the meals that you're going to eat throughout the following week and having to cook all the food at once. However, I would argue that you're either netting zero or even arguably saving time by doing all of this at once, as opposed to cooking a different meal for yourself each day of the week. Now, if you want to start to reap these benefits and want to start meal prepping, before you go, let me just give you a few tips that I've learned over my first few weeks, and these are things that I think would be extremely useful to know while just starting out. First, vary what you eat. In my first week, I wanted to save time, and so I decided to just make seasoned chicken. The problem with this, at least for me, was that I had to eat the seasoned chicken, the exact same seasoning, exact same chicken, every day for lunch and dinner for a week. As you can probably guess, I began to get bored and very sick of the exact same flavor twice a day very fast. And so this led me to not only dreading my meals, but eventually also slacking off a little bit with regards to actually sticking to the meal prep. And so if you're like me and you need various flavors across your meals, I would highly suggest that you vary the meals that you're making for yourself during your meal prep for the week. Second, establish your meals first, then look for healthier substitutions. What I've found is that if you establish your meals with foods that you like, then you'll actually be more likely to stick with the meal prep. Only after you've reached this step should you then start looking for substitutions for some of the foods in order to try and make your meals a little bit healthier. And this is specifically for those of you who are either looking to eat cleaner or looking to hit certain nutritional goals. And so one example where this has worked out for me is specifically with eggs and toast. So as of late, I've absolutely loved eggs and toast. I have it every day. And so I was looking for a way to see if I could make it just a little bit cleaner for myself. And so what I had found is that it was better for me to replace the white toast that I had currently been eating and instead eat whole grain toast, as this would reduce the number of refined carbs that I'm consuming as well as lower the amount of added sugars that I'm consuming. And so this ended up working out for me as the change in flavor didn't really bother me too much, and so I was able to easily substitute the whole grain toast. However, I will also note that if you can't make the substitution, then that's perfectly fine. I would argue that it's more important for you to be able to actually stick with the meal prep and have the foods that you like, as opposed to trying to make all these changes to be extremely healthy, only to then ultimately fail in the meal prep because your meals taste disgusting to you. And so one example where a change actually didn't work out for me is with a bolognese dish that I had made. And so I tried to switch the regular pasta with whole grain pasta. However, I had quickly learned that whole grain pasta, both the flavor and the texture, are just absolutely disgusting to me. And thus, I didn't end up making the switch as I didn't want to begin dreading this meal. Last, but certainly not least, be flexible and follow your palate. After that brutal first week where I just had the seasoned chicken, I did begin to vary my meals a bit, and so I was alternating between a honey lemon chicken dish as well as a Tuscan chicken dish, and these were much, much yummier as they incorporated many different flavors. However, after sticking with this for a couple of weeks, these began to again get a bit plain and repetitive for me, and I ended up actually beginning to crave other foods. So for example, I began to crave pasta and I also began to crave Mexican food. And so instead of forcing myself to continue to eat the honey lemon chicken and the Tuscan chicken, I instead decided to do a bit of research. And ultimately, I ended up finding a couple of ways where I could begin to incorporate the pasta as well as the Mexican food into my meal prep. And so what I ended up doing was I found a pasta bolognese dish, which is just a meat sauce for anyone who's not familiar. And so I used that recipe, and I also found a fajita recipe. And so basically I took these two recipes and then just replaced the honey lemon chicken and the Tuscan chicken. And so basically with this sort of short story here, my main takeaway for you is that if you spend just like a little bit of time doing research, and sort of looking into how you can make meals that'll sort of fit into your routine or fit well into your routine, but also incorporate whatever foods or flavors you're craving, then ultimately it's going to be extremely helpful for you. And it's going to be your best friend in terms of helping you stick to the actual meal prep routine. Because you're not only going to be able to work towards whatever nutritional goals you're trying to hit for yourself, but you're also going to be able to actually enjoy the food that you're eating rather than seeing it as something that you just have to do in order to hit the goal. And yeah, that's everything I have for you today. And just as a side note, if any of you want me in the future to make a cooking video to sort of demonstrate the recipes or how I cook for my meal preps, feel free to let me know down in the comments. And with that, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.